Pika Pikachu?
Hey guys, Pika TV here. I want to give a huge shout out to Blizzard Entertainment for giving me an early access look at the new World of Warcraft expansion, Midnight. Here is going to be the first look at some of the major warrior changes coming our way, so let's dive right into it. Next up, Colossus. Demolish now makes the warrior immune to movement forces during the channel. Previously, Demolish already kind of rooted us in place, however there were some abilities that were able to push us back or distance us away from the mob. Now warriors are immune completely to movement forces during the channel, which means we should never miss any of the damage ticks of the Demolish ability. Next, arms in Colossus, practice strikes now affect slam. Previously this only gave mortal strike and cleave a 20% damage or damage increase, but now this also affects slam, which is kind of a buff to arms. And then protection, one against many no longer affects whirlwind. This doesn't really matter, you're not using whirlwind at all as protection warrior anyways. Mountain Thane, Thunderblast damage increase by 100%. This is just to make it so that, Thunderclap or Thunderblast rather is going to be doing a lot more of our threat, more of our damage coming in Midnight if you're playing Mountain Thane. And then finally, Slayer, Opportunist effects now stacks 2 times. Overwhelming Blades, Overwhelm debuff now stacks to 5, before it was 10. Unrelenting Onslaught now applies 1 stack of Overwhelm, was 2 per stack of Mark Executioner consumed. Slayer's Malice now affects Execute in addition to Overpower and Raging Blow, but damage increase is reduced to 20%, was previously 30. So I'm not sure exactly how much this is going to change the damage. This seems just to be a little bit of, changing the stacks or how many stacks we need exactly. Trying to make it a little bit less complicated for us to do our damage while we're playing Slayer. And then this also affects Execute in addition to Overpower and Raging Blow. So this is good for our Execute phase. However, it's going to be a little bit of a decrease in damage overall for the rest of the fight when you're non-Execute. Alright, next moving over to the class changes, okay? So since Dragonflight, all 3 warrior specs have been overloaded with cooldowns, most of which come from the class tree. The warrior class tree is also focused far more on damage dealing and survival, rather than offering interesting choices and new utility warriors can bring to groups. We're taking a fresh look at warrior class tree in Midnight and looking to make the tree more interesting with more unique effects, so that warriors can bring more unique effects that warriors can bring into the content. Okay, so there are a couple of new challenge changes that you guys will be able to see in Midnight. So we take a look over here. So you can see over here our warrior class tree and the regular class tree are both really different than what you are currently seeing in the War Within. Some of the most notable changes are the capstone changes. So you can see that anger management, things like Last Stand, Champion Spear, and Battlefield Commander, which are like a new capstone, are all here at the bottom without the extra little changed parts of the capstone. Some abilities are completely changed, like Last Stand is no longer a pressable ability that is only for prot. Now it is a little bit of a cheat death mechanic for any of the 3 warrior specs, Arms, Fury, or Prot. Also, you have something called Battlefield Commander here, which is a really interesting ability. It makes your shell abilities have additional effects, such as Battle Shell grants you an additional 3% attack power. So something notable here is that it's not the Battle Shell for everybody that's getting the additional 3%, it's only you. So at first glance you think, oh, maybe this is really OP and you'll never be able to change it. But it only grants you personally 3% more attack power as opposed to everybody else, which is still very good, but not as mandatory as you would think if it gave everybody 3% more. What it does do also, though, it grants different boons to different shouts that we have. For instance, it makes Rallying Cry give 5% leech, as well as 30% movement speed to allies. This is really good because Rallying Cry was a little bit lackluster in 5-man content. In Raid, it was still pretty good, but it was kind of a shadow of its former self when it used to be a lot stronger. I think it used to give 20 or 30% or something like that. Maximum health, whereas now only gives 10% maximum health, but this will help buff it a little bit, giving 5% leech and movement speed as a big raid cooldown. Piercing Howls increased by 100%. That's something that's more PvP oriented. You don't use it as much. There are some small times that you do want to use Piercing Howl that matter, but not huge. Berserker Shout, this is just the additive change of Berserk Berserker Rage, which makes it so that you make everybody in your party immune to Fab Seer and other things. This was famously used in what was the one dungeon in Ardenweld, the one with the first boss that fears you. Hold on, let me just the Shadowlands, or sorry, Mists of Tyrannus Light, right? So that was like the only time I remember actually actively wanting to choose that. But yeah, anyways, doesn't matter too much. And then Intimidating Shout cooldown reduced by 15%. This is like all like little bit of PvP changes, okay? So yeah, that's the major changes of these capstones, and then all the other challenge trees were changed like a little bit for a little bit of quality of life, a little bit more simplicity, so it's not as complicated. Something that's really notable change also is Piercing Howl. It's basically Stampeding Roar, so it makes it so that every time we use Piercing Howl, it gives all allies about 30% movement speed for like 5 seconds, basically. So yeah, let's go back to the changes here. So you have Resonant Voice, which increases duration of your shouts by 20%. That I believe is over here. Then you have Blood and Thunder. Thunderclap now affects 5 nearby targets with rend, causing them to bleed over 15 seconds. So that was already previously something that was mainly for... that was already in our class tree, rather. New talent, Death Strikes, mastery increased by 1% to 2 or /2, and because you put 1 or 2 talent points into it, auto attack damage increased by 50 or 100%. Retaliation, when you take any damage from an enemy within melee range, you have a chance to strike the enemy for physical damage. And then Battlefield Commander, we just went over that. Anger Management, they just moved this over from this tree over to the base warrior tree. And then new arms, or sorry, Interpose, which is new arms and fury talent. So this is a really cool like AoE sack to your team, as opposed to just using Intervene. It makes it so that all 30% of the damage for anybody in 3 yards, so if they're all stacked up, you take 30% of the damage until you take 20% of your max health and damage from this effect. So yeah, a really cool added support tool that's given to DPS warriors. Rend, which last, obviously it's just Rend from before. Hone Reflexes now was buffed. Used previously to 5%, and now reduces cooldowns by 10%. So that's the one that affects all your defensive things like Shield Wall, Die by Sword, Pummel, Intervenes, Power Flag, Stormbolt. We already talked about the Piercing Howl change. Menace now no longer causes Intimidating Shout to knock back enemies. So now the baseline actually keeps them in place. And then the Menace ability now causes them to target to flee, and except for the main one that is cowering. Barbaric Training now causes the enemy increases damage up by 20%, critical damage of Slam, Whirlwind, Thunderclap for arms and revenge and fury. For arms, fury, and revenge for prot. Champion Spear now pulls the targets towards. This is the same thing as before. Intim Shout now causes a range scour and fear. Shattering Throw, Wrecking Throw, the range reduced to 25 yards. Previously was 30 yards. I'm guessing that's like a PvP thing. It doesn't matter at all. Thunderclap damage increased by 100%. So this is really pushing the Thunderclap Mountain Thane for Midnight, especially for prot. But also I believe Arms also uses Thunderclap quite a bit for AoE. Crushing Force is now a 1-point talent. So Crushing Force is this one here. Previously was 2 talents, I believe. This one's Immortal Strike for this. I think Raging Blow for Fury, and then Shield Slam for prot. And then the talent tree layout has been updated. And all these talents have been removed. A lot of them have been changed. Like all these ones are the support ones for the capstones. Things like this as well. Now they've been changed. So it'll be an interesting look at different change on how we're going to be playing in Midnight. Alright. Let's take a look at arms. Okay, so the developer notes. Much of arms damage has from aligning damage increases and high damage cooldowns together, and the loss of damage when we're not doing this correctly every time can be very high. We're keeping focus on Colossus Smash's arm's most important cooldown, adding some new talent to customize it in different fights. We've also removed some arms modifiers on the next of use abilities, such as Martial Prowess, to make it less complex and determine the best rotational ability to use. Finally, removing Sweeping Strikes to keep arms solidly in place as the champion of the 2 target cleave damage. So far in the Midnight build, you haven't seen any of the Apex talents yet for Warrior. Some of the other classes already have their Apex talents fleshed out, but Warrior is not one of them, unfortunately. So we'll have to come back and look at this later. But the new talent, Initiative, causes charge auto attacks to generate 50% more rage for 5 seconds. You have Brute Force. If Slam does not trigger Tactician, the critical strike chance of your next Slam is increased by 100%. Efficiency, Rage Spin on Slam counts as double for Tactician. Just warming up. Colossus Smash generates 15 Rage. And Broad Strokes, Colossus Smash grants 6 charges of Sweeping Strikes. Wow, that's like really crazy actually for AoE. That's actually a really nice change. Powerful Momentum, damage dealt to nearby targets by Sweeping Strikes increased by 25%. Press Advantage, Colossus Smash causes your next 3 Mortal Strikes to guarantee to trigger Tactician. Crushing Combo, Colossus Smash reduces the cooldown of Cleave by 33% for 6 seconds. So yeah, you can already kind of see that all these different talents are really pushing the Sweeping Strikes meta for 2-target Cleave. One thing upcoming you also see is that Colossus Smash now doesn't need to be War. You don't have to choose between Warbreaker and Colossus Smash. Colossus Smash in general causes Warbreaker, so it's just Warbreaker is built into Colossus Smash now, so it'll always be AoE, which is a huge quality of life change. Master Tactician, when overpower has cooldowns, reset a Tactician, your ability to deal 10% damage for 4 seconds. Deep Wounds, this is something that's really been changed now. Deep Wounds previously was something that was inflicted by Mortal Strike, but now everything with Deep Wounds has to do with Execute, and it's like a building bleed that's on the target. Soften them up, Slam increases the damage of your next Mortal Strike by 10%. Stack it up to 3 times. Mortal Wounds, you inflict Deep Wounds on the target that critically strike with Mortal Strike or Cleave. Fatality, Mortal Strike has a high chance to apply Fatal Mark to your target, stacking up to 5 times, which causes your next execute on target with a Fatal Mark, causes the Fatal Mark to deal additional physical damage per stack. And then your Mastery here, the Chain Master Arms has been redesigned while yielding a 2-handed weapon. You deal Mastery % of additional damage. Sweeping Strikes has been redesigned, whereas it makes it so your next 12 damaging single target abilities within 30 seconds hit 1 additional target for 75% of damage with 30-second cooldown. And then with improved Sweeping Strikes, you get to affect 6 additional damaging single target abilities. Blunt Instruments was redesigned. Colossus Smash bonus is increased by 20%, but its duration is reduced by 20%. Collateral Damage ability during Sweeping Strikes damages a second target. Your next Cleave the Whirlwind is increased by 25%, up to 3 times. This is like this is how like you do your big Cleave or your big Whirlwind right after your Sweeping Strike ends. So this is like quite good. But like I think now instead of like waiting until Sweeping Strike ends, you're going to be using it, stacking up to 3 times and then using one of your AoE abilities, something like that, if there's big AoE. Fueled by Violence now heals bleed damage from Rend and Deep Wounds. Fervor Battle now requires 3 targets to trigger Slam, and Slam's damage increased by 50%. This is a buff to Tactician here. You get 2% chance per rage spent to reset the cooldown or power. And Colossus Smash now affects all enemies, as I was talking before, just as Warbreaker previously did. Sharpen's Blade is now a 2-point talent, which grants 5% additional critical strike to Mortal Strike, Cleave, and Execute. Strength of Arms has a 2-point talent. Each point grants 5% damage, critical strike chance, and critical strike damage to overpower and slam. Execution is Precision now buffs Warrior's next Mortal Strike rather than applying debuff to the target. So this is really good for target swapping. Previously, Execution's Precision used to be on the target that you were using Execute on. On Execute on. So it made it so that you change target, you would lose essentially those Execution Precision stacks. Now it makes it applying a buff to the Warrior. So that whenever you use that Mortal Strike, you can cleave 2 executes on 1 target and then hit the main target with a Mortal Strike, with doing great funnel damage into the main priority target. Alright, Bloodletting now increases duration of Rend, Deep Wounds, and Bleeds, and Mortal Strike applies Rend if the target is below 35%. And the Warrior knows Rend, or if the Warrior knows Rend and has Blood, or has Blood and Thunder. Critical Thinking now increases Execute critical strike of 5%, refunds 10% of rage on per Execute. Blade Storm now extends the duration of Colossus Smash on target the first time it deals damage to them. That's really good. Just increases the damage window of the Arms Warrior, especially during AoE. Ignore Pain, cooldown reduced by 6 seconds. Absorb Malva increased by 100. This is a defensive tool. Obviously, Warbreaker is removed since it's been added to Colossus Smash, and everything else has been updated. So mainly, this is what this is doing, is it's causing Arms Warrior like a big buff, because it's kind of lackluster right now in the War Within. It makes our AoE much stronger with not having to choose between Colossus Smash and Warbreaker. It's really focusing on that execute build, so you can see those crazy Argus ramps where you're just spamming execute and doing crazy amount of damage, especially in 2-target cleave. So yeah, I think Arms Warrior is going to look pretty good with all these changes, and it's a long time coming for the class. Next up, let's look at Fury Warrior. So this is before we jump into the Fury Warrior, this is going to be just the talent tree that you're going to be looking at here. Some of the changes like Broad Strokes, just talking up, or just warming up. You can choose between doing single target damage or AoE. Again, you have Fatality, Merciless Bone Grinder, and then Mortal Wounds as your capstone. But yeah, overall, good changes, and look forward to looking at it in Midnight. Next up, Fury Warrior. In Midnight, our goal is to refine Fury's Warrior core builder and spender gameplay and resolve some of its pain points. We've added some powerful execute talents to make conditions about when to use sudden death less complex for players who enjoy it. We've added some bonuses to make Critical Strike a more appealing stat for Fury Warriors, and added some new AoE talent options. We're also reinforcing Bloodthirst to make it reliably satisfying but depressed and create a rhythm for Fury Warriors rotation. And lastly, we're simplifying some of the rotation conditions involving Enrage and major cooldowns like Blade Storm. So the main point of this is that in the War Within right now, you don't really hit Bloodthirst at all. It's really like a filler ability, and if not that, you don't want to press it at all. You just want to be hitting Raging Blow with the Slayer ability, causing like the mini Blade Storm to happen. And yeah, you're just basically avoiding using Bloodthirst. So they want to kind of bring it back, so you're kind of using both Bloodthirst and a Raging Blow at kind of a rhythm pace, and also making it less having to worry about how many stacks of this or how many stacks of that in order to use your execute, and make it just easier for the general public to play the Fury Warrior class. So again, Apex talents are not available yet, but they will be in a future video. Alright, so now what are some of the new talent changes? Alright, Deep Wounds. Execute inflicts deep wounds on the target, causing high damage over 6 seconds. So you can see just in general, you have a lot of different talent changes over here. Something like Odin's Fury and Blade Storm are now a choice, like you can't have both. You have to choose which one you're going to use. They changed the capstones at the bottom here. Now you won't always be having Avatar. You can choose whether you want to use Reckless Abandon or Avatar in this case. This is an interesting PvP talent. Kill or be killed. It kind of reminds me very similar to the Shadow Priest ability, Surrender to Madness, where if you don't kill the mob, then you die. But it's even more intense. But this is strictly like a PvP talent. You'll never use this in a raid fight or like to last 8 more seconds. It just doesn't make sense. But yeah. So then you have a new talent, Scent of Blood. Rampage increases the damage of your next blood dose by 10%, stacking 2 times. Onslaught Thirst. Bloodthirst critical strikes now increase the damage of Raging Blow by 10% in 4 seconds. This is reinforcing they want to juggle using Bloodthirst and Raging Blow back and forth to kind of combo off of each other. Rage Drinker. Bloodthirst critical strikes restore twice as much health and enrages you for 2 seconds. Executioner's Wrath. Execute generates 5 additional rage, increases damage of Rampage by 10% for 4 seconds. New talent, Surge Adrenaline. Raging Blow resets its own cooldown. Your auto attack damage and auto attack speed is increased by 30% for 6 seconds. And then this is the PvP talent, where if you die, you become immune for 8 seconds, and you either kill it or you don't, or either you kill or your killer your entire. Sorry, either you kill or be killed after those 8 seconds, because if you don't kill your target, you die. Next up is Powerful Enrage modified. Enrage increase your mastery by 15% and your leash by 3%. Improved Whirlwind cause your next 4 single target abilities was 2 to strike 4 additional targets. Meat Cleaver as redesigned. Whirlwind deals 100% more damage when it hits 3 or more targets, and you have no stacks of Improved Whirlwind. Bloodborne has been redesigned where targets critically struck by Bloodthirst take an additional 20% additional damage when you bleed sex for 12 seconds. Death Experience has been redesigned. Bloodthirst's chance to enrage you has increased by 10% to 20% if you're enraged, whereas Bloodthirst extends your enrage by 0.5 seconds to 1 second. Frenzy was redesigned as well. Rampage increases your haste by 1 to 2% for 12 seconds. Multiple stacks of this effect may overlap. But this I think now, instead of being on the single target and then going away once your stacks drop, it just makes it so that you can switch targets easily. Because previously, like on Dimensius, right, even if you have to target switch to ads, you want to be cleaving off the main target. Where now this is like a really good quality of life, because now Rampage will just increase your haste generally on you, no matter what target you're hitting. So it'll be really easy to target swap and much better in AoE. Critical Thinking is redesigned. Raging Blow critical strike chances increased by 5 to 10%, and critical strike damage increased by 5 to 10%. And the Rampage now replaces Slam. Okay, that's interesting as well, because you would use sometimes Slam in different Fury builds as like a really filler if it was a single target fight and you would, instead of Whirlwind, you would use Slam. But now Rampage just completely replaces Slam. Improved Bloodthirst is now a 2-point talent. Each point increases Bloodthirst damage by 5%, critical damage by 5%. Cruelty is now a 2-point talent. Each point increases Raging Blow's damage by 10% while in Rage. Blood Craze now increases critical strike damage of your next Bloodthirst, was critical chance. And Recklessness increases all damage, rage generated by 50%, was 100%. That's a little bit of a nerf, right? Making it so that I don't think it's going to be too much of a trouble, because we were kind of overflowing with rage already. But maybe with the level squish and the stat squish, it may be a little bit of a nerf. Otis Fury now rages you. It generates 20% rage. That's pretty good, because you used to have to enrage yourself and then use Otis Fury. And now you don't have to do that. Blazestorm now enrages you as well. That's also, like, these are both really big quality of life changes, so you don't have to do, like, a pre-setup Rampage. For instance, on AoE, you can just hit Blazestorm and you'll be enraged, which is really good. And then a bunch of other talents were just, like, removed, especially something like Single-Minded Fury, which basically had no use. But yeah, you can see the talent tree over here, just how it looks. Lots of things have been changed. For instance, like you can see, like the AoE talents over here have been changed, and then the little bit of a flow where either choosing you to choose like Bloodthirst and Rampage are now like more closer together, so you don't have to really choose in between. You can kind of go down the tree and hit whatever you're looking for. Next up, let's talk about the protection changes coming to Midnight. These are the ones that we're most excited for. Let's start with the developer notes. We're pleased that the major spec work Protection Warriors received in Ghost of Koresh has been really successful. This is mainly the death of Spellblock. So we're comfortable letting things settle a little bit more. Most of the changes Protection Warrior has received are due to the several talents moving from the Warrior class tree over from the Protection tree. And at Midnight, we're positioning Thunderclap to be the primary AoE threat tool, focusing Revenge towards more dealing damage with your excess rage. They're really making Thunderclap be our main ability, whereas Revenge is kind of, what are we doing? Are we doing mass AoE, or are we trying to use it as focusing more damage in our single target abilities? So Revenge has been changed to allow warriors to choose which version best suits their needs and the content, and to better tune it for different content types. So, like everything else, Apex talents are not in this future build, so we'll see it again in the future build of the Alpha. So let's talk about the major talent changes. So we have Sweeping Revenge first. Revenge deals damage to all targets in front of you, reducing damage beyond 5 targets. This is because Revenge normally only will hit 3 targets, but however, with Sweeping Revenge, it makes so it hits all targets. This is basically you must have in Mythic Plus for large AoE fights, but in something like Raid or single target encounters, you don't need to take this talent, so you can focus more on Revenge doing single target damage as opposed to having need to hit everything. Next talent is I Can Do This All Day, which 6% damage you block adds to your next active Ignore Pain or the next Ignore Pain you activate. Your next Ignore Pain can be increased up to 30% of your maximum health. So this is really good for, like, if you're taking a lot of damage and you constantly need large Ignore Pains. This is only if, like, the mobs are doing large damage to you. Or, potentially, if you're the off tank and you're about to take the boss and you don't need to have a big cooldown for the next big hit, You can store all the ignore pain charges up to 30% of your maximum health and just hit it whenever you take the boss for the ability. This also is a talent choice between Brutal Vitality and I Can Do This All Day, as opposed to Brutal Vitality and Fueled by Violence, which is a big change for our tree. Also, Avatar, I think previously used to be on this tree, and now it's moved over to our protection tree instead of being on the class tree. Deep Wounds is now a talent that is only for execute as opposed to being inflicted by our Thunderclap. So this is makes it so that the bleed is doing major damage when we're using execute, but Rend will be our main bleed for whenever it's not an execute. This is just so that Revenge now replaces Slam, so you don't have Slam in the toolkit, which you never used anyways. Also, your Violent Outburst now buffs your Shield Slam, whereas it previously did both Thunderclap and Shield Slam. So this was a problem where you really only want to use your Violent Outburst for proccing Shield Slam, so you get the most rage, and then decide what you wanted to do with that rage, whether it be survivability or more AoE damage through Revenge. So you wouldn't really want to use it on Thunderclap unless you needed Thunderclap for big AoE threat. Now it makes it so that you don't have to think about which one's going to do, it's only going to use for Shield Slam, which I think is a good quality of life change and makes the class more approachable for people to not have to think in that moment. Then you have Red Right Hand, which is replaced by Deep Wounds. This was a talent that made Execute do 50% more damage. Now it's just replaced with Deep Wounds, makes it more simple. Blood Surge also has a chance to generate 5 rage from every time Ren deals damage. Previously was Deep Wounds, so that's just a flavor text change. And then Fueled by Violence, now it's just a separate talent on the tree instead of being a choice between Brutal Vitality and Fueled by Violence. So what does this mean for Prot Warriors in Midnight? What it means is that you'll be focusing a lot more of your abilities on Thunderclap, even if you are on playing Colossus, whereas Revenge was more of the thing. You now be using Thunderclap quite often in the rotational ability. It makes the class simpler. You don't have all these extra talents where you're not sure what to do with them. Now it's everything, you're kind of like choosing what you want to do. Not too much was changed in this talent tree, but overall I think it makes it a little bit simpler and more approachable for new players coming in Midnight. Alright guys, that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you. A huge shout out again to Blizzard Entertainment for giving us a nice early access look at the warrior changes coming in Midnight. Alright, I'll catch you guys later. Peace.